Hey, welcome to the Amplified Podcast. My name is Jac Carnett. I will be your host for today. It's good to see all of you guys. We have been going through the book of Numbers together. And so we ended the last episode on a cliffhanger. And so if this is the first episode you're watching, first of all, welcome. But you may want to go back and watch the previous episode. I'll try to give a little bit of a recap, but of course I can't go into it as in depth as I did in our previous episode. But we are in the middle of this kind of like this cutaway from the main storyline of Israel. We talked about last week that it's kind of like we're watching a movie and something is happening to the main character, and then the screen goes dark and it says, "Meanwhile, far, far away," at the same time. And then it shows you a whole new list of people. That's kind of what we're seeing right here, where the Bible is the story of the Israelites. It's the story of God's people going throughout history. But sometimes we get a glimpse into what was happening in the background of, Israel's movements. And so today is one of those days, and I'm glad you're back because I want to continue this incredible story. And so in the last episode, we got to introduce King Balak and his prophet Balaam. And then we talked a lot about giants and the bronze serpent and a whole lot of foreshadow for Jesus who's going to come later on. But in this episode, we're actually going to be exclusively talking about Balak and Balaam. We get to see how their whole story unfolds right here. And really, I'll say this probably a couple times, but this is the story of God's mercy. It's the story of God's grace. We've gone over it several times that, the Bible tells us 10 different times that Israel complains against God or against Moses while they are in the wilderness. 10 different complaints on 10 different occasions. These could be years apart. These could be months apart. But time and time again, God has been gracious, or Moses has been gracious, and he's asked the Lord to do the same. But in all this time, even while they're bickering and while they're upset at Moses and they're angry at God for bringing them into the wilderness to take them to the promised land, God is actually defending them in the background. And in the background is what we get to talk about today, what's going on with these other people groups. And so if you normally watch, that's awesome. If you normally listen, I'll try to explain this well. But I want to show you this. So this is one of our maps that we've used a few different times. But the people of Israel are coming up kind of from the Sinai Peninsula. They're actually going along the west side or the east side of the mountain range. They're coming up here. They've crossed over the mountains, and they are just north of the Red Sea, about to go over the Jordan River. At least I'm very sure that that's where they're going, because they had to go through the Moabites' territory, and then they defeated King. I want to make sure I get his name right. They defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites. And now we're going to see the Ammonites that are going against him. And so Ammonites, not talking about the rock, talking about the group of people. And they live on the eastern side of the mountain range that borders the Jordan River. And the people of Israel kind of went through their territory over the mountains and into this area right before the Jordan River. And the Ammonites are scared of Israel. They've seen what God has done through them to destroy Og, the king of Bashan. That would have been farther south down here. What he's done to the Moabites, what he's done to what he eventually is going to do to Jericho here in a moment. So the Ammonites at this moment are terrified, and they want to do something about it. So the king Balak has asked Balaam, his prophet, his man of witchcraft, to come and curse Israel. And you could hear all about the journey that they took to get there in the talking donkey in our previous episode, but it's a wild story that the Bible explains to us here. And so we're going to dive right back into the story. Now, Balak has just come to Balaam for the first time. So, or even I'm getting messed up already. So Balak the king called for Balaam the prophet to come to him. So Balak ends with a K. So does the word king starts with a K. So that's an easy way to think about it. And then Balaam is the prophet. Now he's treating God, Yahweh, God of the Israelites, the God of you and I, as like he's just any other false god that he can pay off with money. And so God is going to use him actually to bring blessing upon Israel in this case. And so let's dive into it. Here's what it says. We're in Numbers chapter 23. You can read it in the Amplified text. I wish you could read it in the Alabaster Bibles. Maybe if you're watching this years from now, they've already come out with it. I highly recommend getting these Alabaster Bibles. They are beautiful. This one's a collection. It's a big stack. It's all the epistles and all of the letters in the New Testament after the Gospels. And then Acts may or may not be in there as well. But awesome resource. So here's what it says. Chapter 23 of Numbers. We're going to read chapter 23 and 24 today. Then Balaam, that's the prophet, said to Balak the king, build 7 altars for me here and prepare for me 7 bulls and 7 rams here. Balak did just as Balaam had said, and Balak and Balaam offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Then Balaam the prophet said to Balak the king, stand beside your burnt offering and I will go. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he shows me, I will tell you. So he went to a desolate hill. Now God met Balaam, who said to him, I have prepared 7 altars, and I've offered a bull and a ram on each altar. The Lord put a speech in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak, you shall speak thus. What's funny here is Balaam actually did offer 7 bulls and 7 rams here. And we kind of see later on in the minor prophets that even though all of the Levitical things and all of the priestly and sacrificial systems had been communicated to the people of Israel, they weren't really doing a very good job of offering their sacrifices. But now you have this pagan witch doctor that's offered 7 bulls and 7 rams, probably more than just about any other Israelite had done. And he's doing it for the wrong reason, but it's interesting that this man is willing to go farther than most of the other Israelites, which is crazy. So Balaam returned to Balak the king, and behold, he was standing by his burnt sacrifice, he and all the leaders of Moab. Remember, Moab is in the southeastern portion of Israel along toward the Red Sea, which is down here. So Balaam took up his first discourse. So we're going to see several times that the Lord is going to give words to Balaam. Balak, the king of Moab, has brought me from Aram or Syria, from the mountains of the east, saying, come curse the descendants of Jacob for me and come violently denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? Or how can I violently denounce those who the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the rocks I see Israel, and from the hills I'd look at him. Behold, the people of Israel shall dwell alone, and will not be reckoned among the nations. Who could count the dust of the descendants of Jacob, and number of even the fourth of a part of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, though who are upright and right standing with God, and let my end be like his. So this is an incredible blessing that Balaam is speaking over the people of Israel, even though he's been hired to curse them. And he's saying, who can curse who God has blessed? And who can bless who God has cursed? I want to be and live die a death just like them, because they are so prosperous. They're not going to be counted up like all the other nations. It's an incredible blessing. Then Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? I brought you to curse my enemies, but here you have thoroughly blessed them instead. Balaam the prophet answered, must I not be obedient and careful to speak what the Lord has put in my mouth? Again, he's referring to the Lord not because he really cares about Yahweh, but because this is the particular God he's dealing with on this particular day. Balak said to him, come with me, I implore you, to another place from where you can see them, although you will only see the nearest and not all of them, and curse them for me there. So he took Balaam the prophet to the field of Zophim on the top of Mount Pisgah, and built 7 altars and offered a bull and ram on each altar. So now he's offered 14 bulls and 14 rams for Yahweh. Again, it's not with the right heart, it's not in the right spirit, but it's something, and he's done more than most of the Israelites probably. Balaam said to Balak, stand here beside your burnt offering while I go meet the Lord over there. So again, like I said, they're standing in this mountain range that's kind of right before the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. And so there's probably several peaks that they could have walked between and stood upon to see the Israelites. Then the Lord met with Balaam and put a speech in his mouth and said, go back to Balak, you shall speak thus. When Balaam returned to Balak, he was standing beside his burnt offerings, and the leaders of Moab were with him. And Balak said to him, what has the Lord spoken? Balaam took up his second discourse. So let's keep track of these. So we've seen one discourse, now two discourses. We're going to see several more. What has the Lord spoken? Balaam, the prophet, took up his second discourse and said, rise up, O Balak, and hear. Listen closely to me, son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good and fulfill it? Behold, I have received his command to bless Israel. He has blessed it, and I cannot reverse it. God has not observed wickedness in Jacob, for he is forgiven. This is not saying that the Israelites are perfect. They were not, but the Lord was gracious enough to forgive them because they were his people. Nor has he seen trouble in Israel, and the Lord their God is with Israel, and the shout of the king is among their people. God has brought them out of Egypt. They have the strength of a wild ox, for there is no enchantment or omen against Jacob. Nor is there any divination against Israel. At the proper time it shall be said to Jacob and to Israel, what has God done? Behold, a people rises up like a lioness and lifts its head up like a lion. He will not lie down until he devours his prey and drinks the blood of the slain. Again, this is not, we're talking metaphors here that Israel is going to be dominant above all these other nations. I don't want to read this as well. This is talking about verses 7 to 10, which is the first discourse. The words that Balaam spoke, however, unwillingly, certainly affirm that God's providence for the nation of Israel. It is curious how the Lord used a mercenary and a devious diviner to clearly speak the blessing of Israel. But that too was part of God's providence. Balaam was claiming to speak for the Lord. The Lord would make sure that Balaam indeed speak for him. So if Balaam's going to have the gall to say, I speak for God, God's going to make sure that he says what he wants him to say. And again, he's blessed Israel in an incredible way, saying that God is not going to turn back on his word. He's not going to lie. He's already blessed them. He's not going to turn and now curse them for no good reason. God brought them out of Egypt, and they have incredible strength, and there's no divination against them. There is no omen, as if to say, there's another verse in the Bible that says, the curse unfounded shall not land, which basically means if someone were to try to curse you and you had, committed no sin to receive or to deserve that curse, it's not going to land, which is why you can go out and do street ministry, and it doesn't matter how many curses people yell at you. They bounce off of you because you have the Lord's Spirit upon you. Now, if you're involved in some pretty heavy sinful stuff and someone curses you for it, that's a different story. But in this case, God had forgiven all the things that Israel had done up to this moment. So then Balak said to Balaam, neither curse them at all nor bless them at all. He's saying, I would rather you shut up than keep blessing them over and over. But Balaam answered Balak, did I not say to you, all that the Lord speaks, that I must do? So Balaam has at least one thing going for him. He's going to say what God tells him to say. Then Balak said to Balaam, please come. I will take you to another place. This is now a third location. Perhaps it will please God to let you curse them for me from there. The funny thing is that Israel kind of deserved to be cursed. They were constantly rebelling against the Lord. They were involved in all kind of stupid stuff. But God had forgiven them over and over. And that's God's prerogative. He's allowed to do that. The blood of bulls and goats were part of the sacrificial system, and that certainly helps. But the sacrifice of Jesus was going to come as well. And it says here that God had forgiven them. So even if he had tried to curse them, it wouldn't have worked. So Balak brought Balaam to the top of Mount Peor that overlooks the wastelands. And Balaam said to Balak, this is the prophet to the king, build for me 7 altars for me here and prepare for me 7 bulls and 7 rams here. At this point, the king's got to starting to be, I'm sure he's like getting ticked off a little bit. Like, if I have to sacrifice 7 more bulls and rams, of course, it's not like the king is actually doing it himself, but this is going to be 21 bulls and rams that he's going to have sacrificed for the Lord, and then likely also blessed him a 3rd time as well. And Balaam said to Balak, build for me 7 altars here, prepare for me 7 bulls and 7 rams. And so Balak the king did just as the prophet Balaam had said, and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Again, I keep saying prophet just to help you understand the difference between Balak and Balaam, because it's very, very similar names. I'm not saying that this man is a real prophet at all. In fact, he's a pagan witch doctor who's just happening to have words from the Lord. So that's the end of chapter 23. We get to see the mercy of God played out, where honestly, the Israelites, as we have seen, are a pretty ragtag group that are always upset with Moses for one thing or another, always upset with Aaron for one thing or another. And they keep rebelling, keep complaining, and God is forgiving them. And they kind of deserve to be cursed, but God is gracious enough to forgive them and give them grace. This is still a people group that lived in, they were steeped in idolatry of the worst kind, and paganism and false god worship and rituals and like a false sacrificial system for 400 years. I mean, if you and your family had lived in India for 400 years now, completely surrounded by these false temples, these false gods, it would not be surprising if some of that started to rub off on you, especially without the Holy Spirit being poured out at that time. And so I think God has tremendous grace for the people of Israel here, but I still think they kind of would have deserved these curses. But God's not allowing them to be cursed. He's actually using Israel's enemies to bless them behind their back, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing what the Lord does. So we're going to see a couple more discourses here in chapter 24. The prophecy from Peor. This is the 3rd location, the 3rd mountaintop. When Balaam, the witch doctor, saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go as he had done each other time before, superstitiously to seek omens and signs in the natural world, but he set his face toward the wilderness or the desert. And Balaam raised his eyes, and he saw Israel living in their tents, the tribe by tribe, and the Spirit of God came upon him. And he took his 3rd discourse or oracle and said, I think it was trying to say is he didn't go off, a couple hundred yards to do a little dance or ritual to try to get God to talk to him. He already knew that God wanted him to bless them. And so he gets ready to do it. And sure enough, this is a crazy moment, because it says the Spirit of God came upon him. In other words, I think for a moment, this was now a Holy Spirit filled man who was going to speak an incredible blessing over God's people. And then I think the Holy Spirit's going to be taken from him as well. The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is opened at last to see clearly the purpose and will of God. So this is Balaam talking about himself. The oracle of one who hears the words of God, who sees the visions of the Almighty, falling down but having his eyes open and uncovered. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, and your tabernacles, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens beside the river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Water, that is great blessings, will flow from his buckets, and his offspring will live by many waters, and his king will be higher than Agag. Agag was another false king that Saul was supposed to kill later on. But I think the Agagites were, one of like the really bad people groups in that area. This is crazy. This is actually the most incredible blessing that we've seen so far, the most pointed for sure, where he's now actually speaking about direct things in the Israelites' lives and blessing them specifically. And I could just see, King Balaam getting more and more upset, his face turning redder and redder and redder over this. And his offspring will live by many waters, and his king will be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. Verse 8. God brought Israel out of Egypt, Israel has strength like a wild ox. He will devour the Gentile nations and his adversaries. So now he's actually prophesying as well, and will crush their bones in pieces and shatter them with his arrows. He bowed down to rest. He lies like a lion, and as a lioness, who dares to rouse him? Who dares to rouse him? Blessed, O God, is he who blesses you, and cursed of God is he who curses you. So I think this is one of the areas where we see those who bless Israel are blessed, and those who curse Israel are cursed. Again, let me put a little asterisk next to this. When we say Israel now, at least as Christians, we mean the people of God. So I think there is an element when we're talking about Jerusalem and Israel as, a state. I'm not talking about necessarily the governmental complex of Israel. I'm really more talking about the people of God. So keep that in mind. Then Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. And Balak said to Balaam, I called you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have done nothing but bless them these 3 times. And I wrote my Bible here. If you will follow God's will, the Lord will make even your enemies to bless you. That's a pretty amazing thing. So King Balak says to him, therefore now flee to your place. I had intended to honor you greatly, but behold, the Lord has held you back from honor. Balaam the prophet said to Balak the king, did I not tell your messengers whom you had sent to me? Even if Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord to do either good or bad of my own accord. What the Lord speaks, that I will speak. Now, look, I am going to my people. Come, I will advise you as to what the people of Israel will do to your people Moab in the days to come. So now he's going to give a 4th prophetic moment. Took up his 4th discourse. So now we have his 4th discourse. The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of man whose eyes have been opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God, who knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down, but having his eyes open and uncovered. Kind of bragging a little bit there, but whatever. I see him, but not now. I behold him. Him, capital H, as in the Lord, but not near. A star shall come forth from the descendants of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel and shall crush the forehead of Moab and destroy all the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be taken as a possession. Mount Seir, Israel's enemies, also will be a possession. While Israel performs valiantly, one of the descendants of Jacob will have dominion and will destroy the remnant of the city. It's amazing what's being said right here. I want to read this that the Amplified text says. This poetic language clearly refers to the Messiah. So a false witchcraft doctor, witch doctor, is now prophesying the Messiah, Jesus, to come later on. That's how amazing this story is. The pagan Balaam had a vision coming of the Hebrew Messiah, the Lord Jesus Christ. He was visible from afar. He was like a star, radiant and beautiful. He is the victor over his enemies, including Moab, the nation hired to curse Israel. It's amazing what the Lord is doing here, where he's literally taking the false worship of another man, his all of his oracles and all of his divination. He's actually using him as a mouthpiece to bring about the prophetic vision of the Messiah. That's amazing. Then Balaam looked at Amalek and took up his 5th discourse now. So now 5 different prophetic moments we're seeing from this man. Amalek was the first neighboring nations to oppose the Israelites when they left Egypt, but his end shall be destruction. The Amalekites were a particularly horrific people group. The Amalekites were... This is also the group of Agag that he was talking about here in moments. They were very strong people, but they attacked Israel when Israel had just come out of Egypt. They don't have their bearings. They're not trained soldiers. They are defenseless. That was the moment when the Amalekites tried to destroy Israel. And God is gracious. He's gracious. But one of the things that boils God's blood the most is taking advantage of the innocent. And that's exactly what the Amalekites did. And it's why God tells Samuel to tell Saul later on to wipe out the Amalekites. That this same culture of taking advantage of the defenseless has reigned all the way through. And these were the Agagites as well. And Saul refuses to take out their king. He wants to keep the spoils of war. He wants to keep the king as, tribute or whatever. And because he doesn't destroy the whole family of the Agagites, guess who is a descendant of the Agagites later on? No one else but Haman in the story of Esther, that again tried to wipe out Israel and almost succeeded had it not been for Esther. He was a descendant of this horrific people group, the Agagites or the Amalekites. So again, this false witchcraft guy has just now prophesied correctly that the Amalekites will be wiped out. Now we're going to see the sixth discourse. Now, this dude's on a roll. He's just prophesying all these amazing things over and over. Balaam looked at the Kenites and took up his sixth discourse and said, "Strong is your dwelling place and your nest in the cliff. Nevertheless, the Kenites will be consumed. How long will Assyria, keep you, Israel, captive?" He's saying that now this other group of people that has opposed God and Israel will also be wiped out. That's number 6. Then his seventh discourse, and I believe this is his final one as well. These are getting shorter. So 7 different prophetic moments that we're seeing from this false witch doctor. Took up his 7th discourse and said in verse 23, "Alas, who can live unless God has ordained it? But ships shall come from the coast of Kittim and shall afflict Assur," this is Assyria, "and Eber. So they, the victors, will come to destruction." So Assyria will eventually be destroyed. Then Balaam arose and departed and returned to his place, and Balak also went on his way. So it's amazing the way God can use even his people's enemies to bless them. We're seeing this in this story 7 different times now, where God is using this false witch doctor to bless Israel. And so it's really a story of God's grace, really a story of his mercy, the way he will take care of his people, even when they're being the most obstinate. God is going to take care of them. And so it's a wild story, and I'm glad you tuned in for this episode today. That is the end of chapter 24. The next episode we're going to get into is the third plague that falls upon Israel before they go into the wilderness, the third of 3. And I have so many notes about this. Oh, we're nearing the end of Numbers here. And so now we get to compare in our next episode how well each of the tribes have done over these 40 years. Some of them have grown, some of them have shrunk dramatically, but we get to see how each one has fared, and we'll compare from episodes ago what we had put together. And so next episode is going to be great. We look forward to having you, and we're so glad you tuned in with us today for the Amplified podcast. You can find the link for Alabaster Bibles in the bio, but otherwise, please like and subscribe to this if you have not. It really helps more people to see God's word. And so until then, we'll see you next time. Bye.